Welcome to part 24 of my basic series in the Blender game engine. In this video, we're going to revisit our 3D platformer character game in which we can move a character around a game and jump and explore a world. We created this scene in part 21 of this video series. I'll put a link to that video on the screen right now. But in this video, we're going to add a new feature. We're going to add the ability to shoot. If I go ahead and press the left button on my mouse, my character pulls out a gun and I can shoot. Now, yes, I've already done a tutorial in this video series on how to shoot. I'll put a link to that video on the screen right now. But the difference here is that my character can shoot either while he's doing his little idle animation, while he's sort of rocking back and forth. I can make him pull out his gun and start shooting, or he can start shooting while he's walking. So what's really happening here is we're combining animations together. I made an animation of his right arm sticking straight out and sort of doing a recoil motion, so that is its own animation. And that animation is being played at the same time, and it's sort of overlaid on top of his walk animation, but only his arm that is shooting has been taken over by the overlaid animation, and so we can make him shoot with whatever action he's doing. I can make him shoot while he's walking, or if I let go of the W key, he can shoot while he's just idling. So let's go ahead and jump in. The file that's on the screen right now is where we left off in part 21 of this series, and I'm actually going to give this file to you. There's a download link for this exact file that I have on my screen right now in the description area below this video on YouTube, so you can go ahead and download this file and follow along with me in this video for yourself, and you'll have your own start of a 3D platformer game. Of course, if you like this video or if you learned something, go ahead and click on that like button below. It really helps out my channel, and if you want to see more videos just like this one in Blender and in Tech, click on that subscribe button as well. Let's go ahead and jump in. Where we have left off is we have a character with an armature, bones, inside of a gray cube. Why is the gray cube there? Well, if I have the gray cube selected, if I look at the logic bricks that are on the gray cube, you can see that this gray cube has the logic bricks for my basic motion. If I press the keyboard key W, it's going to have some character motion. It's going to make the character move forward on its local y-axis. In fact, it's going negatively on its local y-axis. When you move your mouse movement, it's going to use the mouse look actuator to turn your character around, and when you press the space key on your keyboard, the space bar, you're going to make your character jump. So this box is the parent of your character's armature, which in itself has some own logic, has its own logic. This logic basically calls upon the actions. That's why we're using this action actuator. And these actions are actually animations that make your character walk. This is the walk cycle, and this is the idle animation cycle again. Now, in order for these two actions, the walk cycle action, which is an animation, and the idle animation, work together in the way that they do is because of these priority options. Priority 0 means that this walk action has priority over top of 0 comes before 1. This walk has priority over the idle animation. So when you're not pressing the W key on your keyboard, when you're pressing basically nothing, you're going to be doing the idle animation. Your character is going to be waving or rocking back and forth. But then, because this has a higher priority, or it's 0 comes before 1, it's going to overtake the idle and play the walk action or animation when you press the W key down on your keyboard. So that's how you prioritize animations. So if I press P again on my keyboard, oops, I've got my bone selected in pose mode, and you can't press P while you have something in pose mode selected. So I'm just going to select the cube and I'll press P, and as you can see, he idles and then he can walk forward and he'll go back to the idle animation as soon as I let go of that W key. Let's go ahead and just fix one little thing in this file. If I have my gray cube selected, I don't want to see that all the time, so I'm going to go over to the Object tab in the Properties window, and I'm going to change its maximum draw type to wire. So now it will just look see-through, but I can still select other things and still select it. What I want to do at this point is I want to create an action or an animation of just my character's right arm out pointing forward like he's holding a gun and doing a little recoil animation. So I'm going to make my logic editor window smaller so I have my dope sheet window bigger, and the dope sheet's where I'll do most of my animation. I'll go back to frame 0. Now it's in this window that if I select not the dope sheet mode, but I want to be in the action editor mode, because this is where I can recall or bring up saved actions. In this case, we don't have any up, but I can go to this button right here and select my idle action. And the reason why it had that F in front of it is because it is saved in this Blender file using a fake user. That's why I have this F darkened. That's very important. If you press the X now, that F means that it'll have a fake user in the file and it'll stay saved in the file. Again, very important. And here's the walk cycle. So if I zoom in on that with my scroll wheel on my mouse, you can see that I've got a nice little walk cycle there. And our idle, that's great. Okay, let's go ahead and press the X. It's safe because it has the fake user. And I'm going to go to frame 0. I'm going to turn on my red record button, and I'll go to my side view at frame 0, and maybe I'll press 3 to go to my side view, and then I'll press 9 on my numpad, and 9 on your numpad switches the direction of your view. So if I was looking at it from the right, now I've pressed 9, it's going to my left view. That's really handy. So I'm actually going to go to my top view with 7, and I'm going to rotate my arm forward, kind of like that. Not all the way though, because I'll rotate this one forward. There we go, so it's pointing forward. I'll go to my side view, 3, and then 9 to go from the right to the left view. And now I'll kind of tap R and tap R. Again, I'm in pose mode of my armature, so I can pose my character here, and I am making a keyframe at frame 0. And that looks fine to me. Let's go ahead and go a few frames later, maybe to frame 7 or so. And I'm going to animate his arm kind of going up like it's shooting a gun. And then I'll go a few frames later, and he's going to go down a little bit. And then a few frames later, he's going to go just slightly above where he was at the first frame, like that. So let's take a look. He starts there, he goes up, he goes down, and I think he goes too far up there. So I'm going to just kind of bring it down. Whoops. You don't want to move the arm at all. Let's see. Okay, so basically the first frame and the fourth keyframe are pretty close together, and that's intentional because the arm isn't always going to be moving. It's going to go and shoot and then go up and go down and then go back up. I think the down one should be a little bit more down like that. And so I'm just modifying that keyframe. So now if I press A a few times to select all the keyframes, I'm going to duplicate these just a few times so I can see what the animation looks like when it repeats over and over again. So they're all selected. I'll press Shift D on my keyboard. Shift D will duplicate. I'm going to slide these down. I'm going to try to keep these fairly evenly spaced, so that between that is how I spaced it out. So if I press Alt A, it'll play. But it's only playing because my timeline is set to end at 20. It won't play all the way to the end, so I'm going to just set it to 100 so it doesn't get in the way of it playing back. So I think it's actually, if I look at it, it's going down very quickly, but it's going up slowly, and that's not what I want. I want the arm to go quicker up, like it's shooting, like it's recoiling really fast. So I'm going to go to this frame 7, and I'm actually just going to move it back a few frames to make that up action happen quicker. And then I'll go to this one and move it back a few frames, so G to grab a keyframe, and I'll see what that looks like. And I think he needs to move his arm up more, so I'm going to rotate that up. And I'll just duplicate that keyframe, Shift D, and when I Shift D, it makes a duplicate, and I can just replace this one here. So let's see how that looks. And I think his arm goes too far down here, So I'm going to rotate it up a little bit, both the upper arm and the forearm, and then I'll duplicate that, Shift T, and replace the second one. So let's see. Ooh, I like that. Okay, so that's a nice animation. I'm going to press A few times to select all my keyframes. I want 4 repetitions of this, so I'm going to press Shift D and duplicate these, and I'm going to make sure that there's a nice spacing. So after these first 4, there is a space between 22 and 30 of about 8. So 52 and 60, that's about 8 as well. So I think we have a nice repetition there. Let's just play it and see what that looks like. Okay, so now I want to make sure that it's going to loop nicely, because if I'm playing this as an action in my game, it's going to go and play through all 4. What I actually might just do is take this first keyframe as if it's going to happen right after this last one, and duplicate it, and then put it, that is at frame 92 hopefully. And so I'm going to put it right there. Yeah, it's 112 rather to 120. So it's that same distance there. And so I'm going to end this action when I define it in my logic to end at 119, so that it's going to play from frame 0. He's going to shoot 4 times. And then after the 4th shoot, so this is the 4th shoot right there, it's going to get ready to, it's going to go to frame 119, and then it's going to start over again and shoot again. Okay, so that's how I'm going to do a loop. It's going to end right at 119. So we have a range of 120, 0 to 119. I'm going to name this action. We're going to call it shoot. That's appropriate. We're going to give it a fake user with the F button there, so it's dark. And now I can press X, and it's saved in my Blender file. In fact, I might go ahead and press Control S on my keyboard and click to save. Let's go ahead and add in the animation. So I'm going to go back to my logic editor, and we're going to make our character fire when we press the left mouse button. So I'm going to add a mouse sensor. I'm tempted to make a keyboard sensor, but that's not what I want. It's the mouse left. So I'm going to name this logic brick left, and I'm going to add an actuator. It's going to make an action play. So I'll connect those up. When you press left, I want the shoot animation to play, and I have to define my keyframes, and I said those many times. It's 0 to 119, my start frame and my end frame, just like that. Now, I'm going to leave, I think, my priority to 0, and I'm not going to change anything here. What I'm going to do, though, is change my play to either loop end or loop stop. I'm going to choose loop stop. I want him to stop shooting as soon as I let go of my left mouse button, but I want it to loop that action as long as I hold the left mouse button down. So looping, but stopping as soon as I let go. That's for. Loop end would play the action all the way to the end and then stop, even if I let go of the mouse button earlier than that. So we want loop stop there. Let's go and see what happens. I'm going to go to my game. Let's go to a nice camera angle. I'll press P. I have to select something that is not a bone in pose mode. P to play my game, and I'll press and start shooting. But if I press the W key, it's not merging together those actions. So if I press escape, we can try that again. I can press P. I'm not going to try shooting. I'm going to try walking. That works fine. If I stop walking, he idles. That's fine. But if I start shooting, it's not able to merge the actions together. And that's because of that little option that we haven't talked about yet, called layers. Now, layers, they're going to be a little bit finicky here, and I'm not sure why. If this is a bug, it's been around for a while, I think. But we're going to make this shoot action have a higher layer. This is like a layer in the NLA editor window in Blender, where you can have tracks. This is sort of like a video editor track. So if I go to my video sequence editor, you can see that we can have video clips in any one of these tracks. The first top track would be 0 and then 1. Well, it sort of acts a little bit differently than you might think. I'm going to change this back to a dope sheet. Window, where is it? Right there. Okay, so basically what you have to do is make this overlapping or taking over action a higher layer, rather a higher number layer, and so it will take over the character's action. Now we're gonna have to change this once we add a gun. You're gonna see it's a little bit finicky, but let's go ahead and leave it at layer 1, and the other two we're gonna leave at layer 0. And so now if I press P to play my game, I have to select something that isn't in pose mode. I can shoot and I can walk, and as you can see, it's letting me walk while I'm shooting, although, is it playing the action again? Oh, okay, I actually made a mistake. I just paused the video for a second and I realized what was going on there. If you look at my frames, I typed start at 0 and my end frame for the shooting was supposed to be 119, not 199. So what I was seeing on my screen was my character was shooting, but then his arm would be still, and then I would wait a few more seconds and the arm would start shooting again, and I wasn't sure why that was. 119, there we go. I typed it in again wrong, but it's 119. So now if I play my game, you can see that I can hold my mouse left button down and he'll shoot while idling, and he'll shoot while walking, and that's great. Now, as I just said a moment ago, things are going to get a little bit finicky when we add in the gun. So let's go ahead and add in a gun. I'm going to go to my character's arm, and we'll press 3 to go to my side view, but then 9 to go to my left view instead of the right view. I'm going to press Shift S on my keyboard with that single bone selected. Shift S will bring up the snap menu. I'm going to select cursor to selected. My 3D cursor will go to the base of that bone, and I'll press Shift A on my keyboard. I'm going to add a mesh cylinder, and that's where my cylinder is. I'll go back to my left view. I'm going to tap R and then 90 to rotate it 90 degrees to the right, and I'll press enter. Oops, you know what? I've still got my record button turned on, so I'm going to get rid of that keyframe in my dope sheet. I made an animation on my cylinder, which I did not want, so now that's gone. I'm not worried about it. Okay, so let's go ahead and move that cylinder to his arm, and let's scale it down a little bit. I'm just going to make sort of an arm-based gun without a place for him to hold onto it. It's just going to be going over top of his arm. And I'll press tab to go into edit mode. I'm just going to make this look a little bit more fancy. Checking from my front view and checking from my top view. Looks pretty good to me. I'm going to make this back face a bit smaller with the S key. I'm going to make this one a bit bigger and a bit more out. I'll press Control R. Control R will make a loop cut. I'll click, and then I'll click to put it right there. I'll tap S to make it a bit bigger, and I'll tap Control R again on my keyboard to make another loop cut. I'll slide it and click right about there, and I'll tap S to make that smaller, and maybe I'll press G twice on my keyboard. G twice will let you slide an edge loop like I have selected right now. And let's go ahead and make a bevel. So I'll hold Alt on my keyboard and right click, and I'll bevel, Control B, that edge loop. And I'm going to take the face on the end of the gun, and I'll tap I. I will inset the face, and I'll make it a little bit smaller and click. I'm going to extrude that inwards. Actually, I'll tap S to make it a bit smaller. I'm going to tap E to extrude that inwards, and I think I pretty much have my gun. So if I want to make it smooth though, I'll press tab to go back into object mode. If I go over and press smooth shading, that's going to make it look smooth, but you can see it does not look very good because this object has smooth sections, but it also has corners. I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode, and I'm going to put some proximity loops around the existing edges. That means if I press Control R and I click, Control R makes a loop cut, and I click, and then I slide that loop cut and put that edge loop right next to the corner at the front of the gun. That's called a proximity loop. But I'm going to undo that actually, because I can do two at once. I'm going to press Control R and then click to put a loop cut right there. But now if I right click it puts it right in the middle, and I can bevel that whole edge loop. So I'll press Control B, and that will let me move my mouse and spread that one edge into two. And now if I click, I've got an edge loop right there and right there. Okay, let's do the same thing again over here. Control R, click, right click to put it right in the middle, Control B to bevel it apart. And as you can now see, I have an edge loop. I'll Alt and right click to select that right there and right there. Perfect. Let's do it in the inside the barrel. Control R, click, right click, Control B, and Control R, click, right click, Control B, and Control R, click, right click, Control B. And I'm going to inset this circle. Actually, I'll do it one more time. Control R, click, right click, Control B, and then click. I'm going to inset this back circle, so I'll select the face, and then I to inset. That will make an edge loop on just the inside of that face. Same thing over here. I'll select this one, tap I to inset, and so now there's a proximity loop on both sides there, and pardon me, I'm in face select mode, and there. So those two are the proximity loops around that original edge loop right there. Okay, let's press Tab to go back into object mode. I'm going to add some colors here. So in fact, I have a big outliner window here. I'm just going to divide that up and then merge the properties window into that one. So now I have a taller properties window. Great. Let's go ahead and add a material to that. So under the Materials tab, I'll press New, and I'm going to make this material a little bit darker. Great. I'm going to make a totally black material on the same object. So I'm going to press this little plus. That will add another material slot to the same object. I can add a new material into the slot. It's going to be a totally black and shadeless material, so no shading at all. And if I press Tab to go into edit mode and I select a face, in this case that one, in fact I'll press Control select, and what do I want to do? Select more. Is that in here? Select more, less, and more. It'll select one more. You can press Control plus on your number pad if you have one on your keyboard, or Control minus on your numpad to select more or less. And I'm going to select the material and click on Assign. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select a whole bunch of faces, Control plus, and I'm going to add a third material. It's going to be a little bit darker for the inside of the barrel, and I'm going to click New, and it's going to be a darker version of the gray, and maybe not so specular, and click on Assign with those faces selected. So now I've got sort of a nicer looking gun that has a darker shading and then a black inside face. I'm going to take my gun and I'm going to parent it to just the arm, the forearm bone. So I'm going to select the gun, hold Shift, right click on the forearm bone. The bone armature was already in pose mode, and so now I can press Control P to bring up my Set Parent To menu, and I'm going to select just the bone. And so it's not going to do any kind of weight setting. It's not going to do any deformation on the whole armature. It's just going to parent two objects together as normal. Well, the second one, the parent, happens to be a bone. Great. So now if I select something that isn't in pose mode and I press P, I can see my gun. That's okay. But now it's not firing. I'm clicking my mouse button and it's not firing. And so there is an issue here. When you parent something, you can no longer use that action. It's not working with the same layers. And so how do you fix this? Well, if I go back to my logic editor window, I pressed Escape to get out of my game, and I look at the armature action and how we added this layer. We changed it from 0 to 1. It turns out you need to do the opposite if your affected armature has a child object on it, and I'm not sure in what circumstances it might need this or not, but the fix here is to change this shoot actions layer back to 0, and then change the other two actions, the walking and the idling, up to 1. So basically, as far as I can tell, just sort of reverses the order or the numbers that are on the order of the layers. And so now I think this should work. If I press or select something that isn't in pose mode and press P, I can shoot and idle, and I can press W and walk and shoot while walking. Now you notice that maybe my character can't move as nicely as before, and that's because this gun is not an object that's going to play nice. Because it's a static object, it will hit other objects, it'll hit maybe the collision bounds of the island, or it'll even hit the character. So I'm going to turn it into a ghost object and have no collision, so now it won't interfere with anything else. So I can play, I can walk, I can shoot while walking, but let's go ahead and add a bullet in for the end of this video, and there's a little bit of logic to deal with there as well. So to make a bullet, I'm going to press Shift S on my keyboard. Shift S will bring up the snap menu, and I'm going to select cursor to selected, and now I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to add a UV sphere, and right away with my UV sphere, I'm going to make it a smaller, or have smaller segments and rings, so it has fewer polygons. So I'll change 32 segments to 16 and the rings to 12. So we have like a quarter of the polygons now. That's great. I could even make these lower if I wanted to. Sure, 16 or 14 and 9. Great. I'll set my shading as smooth, and I'm going to move that up to be in front of the gun, and I'll tap S to make it about the right size. I'll go to my front view. Looks pretty good to me. In order to make an object shoot and have duplicates made of itself, it has to be in another layer. But before we move it down to this lower layer, I'm going to give it a nice color. So we'll add a nice, let's say, pink color. Sure, pink. I'm going to name the object as well, so I will call it Pinky. Sure, it's going to be called Pinky. And I want to shoot from the gun, but not in the middle of the gun. I want to shoot from out in front of the gun. And so I'm going to press Tab with the gun selected, and I'm going to press A a few times. I'm going to move the gun back so that its origin is out front here, and I'll press Tab to go back into object mode, and I'll move it back up towards the front of his arm, towards the pinky ball. So now the gun's origin is in front of the gun, and that's where new pinky balls will be created, and they'll shoot forward once we make that happen. Let's go ahead and give this object the right collision bounds and the right kind of physics. So it's a static object by default. We need Pinky to be a rigid body. We also want it to have collision bounds, and by default that's box. We're going to change that to a convex hull. If you use a sphere, it tends to have it too big of a collision bounds, and you can't really change it very easily. I will want to go to Object and Apply and Scale. That might help it out. But if I go into Solid View, you'll see there is a big circle, and if I press P to play, we have to go back into Material View. You can't see that bigger circle in Material View, unfortunately, at least not on my computer. You'll see it floats above the ground, and we don't want that. So I'm not going to use Sphere. I'm going to use either Convex Hull, or I could even use a box. That should be fine. So now we've got that ball. Great. Let's go ahead and select it and press M to bring up my Move to Layer pop-up window, and I'll move it to my lower layer, because you can't have a spawned object on the same layer. It needs to come from a hidden layer in your game that you don't have visible. So now on my gun, I'm going to set up my logic, and my logic says that if I press my mouse button, it's going to be my left button, so left, and we want this to happen all the time, so I'm going to press this little true level triggering button. It's going to happen 60 times per second. If I add a new object when you press the left mouse button down, so we're going to add an edit object actuator. It has an add object mode, and I'm going to add Pinky. That's why we named it and called it Pinky. So now if I connect those up, whenever you press your left mouse button 60 times per second, so we're not skipping any frames, it's going to add a new bullet. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. I'll start firing, and as you can see, we do not get the result that we want, but it looks pretty funny. And we're stuck because the balls are very heavy compared to us. Okay, let's get out of that. What I want to do here is I want my gun also to be hidden until you start firing, and it will make it visible, but we'll do that at the end. What I'm going to do here is on my gun, we're going to create a counter property, a counter variable if you're a programmer. So I'm going to add a game property over in this, this little plus will bring up this panel, and I'm going to add, by the way, if you're on a different computer like a Mac or a Windows PC or a Linux computer, this properties panel might be on the other side. I'm not sure on what computers it's on what side, and I'm not sure why it does that, but it just is. So we added a game property. We're going to change the type to an integer. That means just the whole number. We're going to name this I. Sure, that's a boring name, but if you're a programmer, you'll know that we use boring names like letters. And I'm going to make it so that I is always counting up. So I'm going to add a sensor. It's going to be an always sensor. It's going to skip 0 frames, but we want it to always be firing. And so 60 times per second, we're going to change the property called I. We're going to make it add 1 every time. So I typed in 1 and changed the mode to add, and I'll connect those up. Now, when I press the left mouse button just once, I want to reset I to 0. Okay, so I'm going to add another left mouse sensor, and it's going to be left. And when we only want this to happen once, we're going to use this tap button, which means you can only tap it once, and you have to let go and tap it again in order to have this happen. So I'm going to make when you press your left mouse button right away, so when you just tap it, it's going to set this property to 0 because it could be counting up your entire game. So I'm going to add a property actuator, and I'll connect those up. It's going to make I 0 when you press, that's a 0, not a O, when you first press down your left button. Now, obviously, we don't want so many bullets or pinkies to be firing out. We want them to be spaced out, and if we want to tweak it, we should make it kind of follow the recoil animation of your arm. But for now, we're just going to say that whenever this I property counts up to 15, that means when you first start pressing your left mouse button, it's going to start at 0 always, and it's going to count up to 15. We want to only fire and create a new instance of pinky object when it gets to 15. So I'm actually going to get rid of that logic brick. If I go back, you'll see it was just firing at 60 frames per second, skipping 0 frames. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of this and we're going to move down this add pinky actuator. I'm going to move that down after I collapse it. You can move it down the stack. I'm going to say if a property called I, that one right there, is equal to 15, we're going to add a pinky. Okay, so right now if I play, and I'll bring those logic bricks up in a second, if I play my game, you'll see that it waited till 15 and it made a pinky. So we want to make sure that you're pressing left as well. So I'm going to add a mouse left button, so mouse left, and so you're going to have to be pressing left and have I equal to 15. So let's go ahead and check that out. I'll press P, and then I'll press my left mouse button, and as you can see, it only made one error because when it gets to 15, I want to reset to 0, and then when it gets back up to 15, I want to have it fire again and then reset back to 0. And so we're going to use this I property as sort of a delay at the beginning and as a sort of interval for how fast they come out. I could have used a delay sensor, but that wouldn't have let me, there it is, but that wouldn't have let me delay the first bullet that came out, and so you would have a bullet sort of dribble out as the gun was being pulled out, and that's not what I wanted. I was playing around with that several times before I recorded this video. So I want to say that if the property I gets equal to 15, remember it's already fired, it's already added a pinky, but then, because this is lower in the stack, if it becomes 15, it's going to reset itself. So I'll go to property and I'll connect these up. If it gets to 15, it's going to assign I to equal 0 again, which means that once it gets back up to 15, it will fire again and then reset again, and so it's a nice loop that will work quite well. Let's go ahead and I'll actually leave that on the screen. So if you want to pause the video and do that for yourself, you can. But let's go ahead and try this out. I'll press P and I'll start firing. and I'll walk around. And of course we haven't made the pinky go forward yet, but that seems to be working quite nicely. Let's go ahead and give pinky some velocity. So on this lower layer, I'm going to select pinky, and at its first initial instant that it exists, so I'm going to add an always sensor, but always tap. So when it first comes into existence, it's going to get some motion, and I'll connect those up. We're going to make sure that pinky has a rigid body physics type, and we're going to give it some, I believe we're going to give it some linear velocity. I'm going to change my gizmo to point locally. If I hold shift and select both layers, I can see them both at the same time. I'm going to select the gun, and you'll see that the gun's local z-axis is pointing forward. So I want pinky's local z-axis to have some force when it first becomes into existence. So I'm going to give it a force of, in fact, not a force, but a linear velocity, I think, of 25. I played around with these numbers, and I might have to adjust them in this video. And we're going to make sure it's a local direction. So now, if I press P, whoops, we gotta only show this top layer. If I press P and I click, you can see that I've got my bullets firing. And of course, I could adjust that number 15 in those places that it was in my gun's code, but it seems to be working pretty well. I think it could be coming out too fast. So if you look at the animation of the gun, it's going quite a bit slower than the bullets are coming out. So if I go back to my gun's code, the logic, I'm going to change 15, whenever I see number 15, I'm going to change it. So whenever it gets to, let's say, 22 and 22, I think it's only twice, and let's see what that does. I'll press P to play. Okay, so you can adjust that to how you like. The very last thing I'll do in this video is I'm going to make it so that the gun is hidden until you start firing, like he's going to pull out his gun. And so the only thing I have to do there is I'm going to make it so when the game first loads, I'm going to make an always sensor with a tap. It's going to make the visibility of this object invisible. So I'll uncheck visible, and I'll connect that up. So now I want to make it so that if I am pressing left at all, it's going to make the gun visible. So I'm going to use or reuse this logic brick, and if you press left, it's going to, and I'm going to make another visibility actuator. It's going to make it visible, and so I'll connect this left up to visibility true. That should work. It is getting a little bit complicated here, but if you're following along, you can sort of deconstruct it and then reconstruct it for yourself to understand it. I'm going to make this logic brick called hide, because it's unchecked there, and this one's going to be show. I'm going to say I'm going to name these all I equals 0. Oh, this one's also I equals 0. I probably could have done that a little bit better, but oh well. This one's called add pinky. This one's going to be called I++. In coding, plus means add 1. This is going to be mouse left tap. And this one will be if I is equal to 22. Equals in programming means the checking of equality between two values if I is equal to 22. This logic brick will have the same name. If I is equal to 22, we probably could have reused those. It'll add a .001, that's okay. And this one will be an always tap. Okay, so if you want to pause the video and catch up with me and see if you can follow along with these logic brick paths, please do. Let's go ahead and check out our game though. I'll make that window smaller. I'll do a quick Control S and click to save. I'll play my game, and so now my character... Oh, okay, so I made a mistake here. I paused the video and looked up what it was. I noticed that when I was playing my game and I was firing, it all looked good, but then as soon as I let go of my left mouse button, the gun would not disappear. So let's go ahead and press escape and see why that is. The gun shouldn't be there when I'm not firing. And if I look at my gun's logic bricks, if I have if I look at where this should be not visible, and I look where it's connected up to, it's connected to this and and then the and is connected to this always tap. That's not the right logic break at all. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to add a mouse actuator, and when we are not pressing the left mouse button, so I'll click on invert for left mouse button and I'll reconnect that up. That makes sense if I'm not pressing my left mouse button, and so it's going to follow through to making that gun invisible. Okay, so those are my finished logic bricks. Hopefully, let's go ahead and test it out. I'll make that window smaller, and I'll press P to play my game. I should be able to fire and idle, and fire and walk, and let go and just walk, and let go and just idle, and fire if I want to. Last thing here, if I want to make that transition a bit nicer, you'll see how the gun or his arm just sort of pops out right away. If I want to transition there, if I want him to make it look like his arm is going to swing up, I can do that by just adjusting with the forearm or any bone selected. I want to add in what's called a blend in, and so I'm going to change this number up to maybe 4 or so. You don't want to go too high, and what that will do is it'll make it so that when this action comes in, I'm going to make it called shoot. It will take 4 frames to become fully there, so you'll see the arm go from where it was to swing upwards with that blend in property in 4 frames. So I can press P now. With something that's not in pose mode, and now you can see that if I press the left mouse button, it kind of nicely swings up. There isn't a way, as far as I can tell, to make it swing down nicely, but that does look nicer. So that will be it for this video. Again, if you like this video or if you learned something, go ahead and click on that like button below. And if you want to see more videos just like this one in Blender and in tech, click on that subscribe button as well. Also, check out my Facebook page at facebook.com/borncg. On that page, I answer subscribers' questions and post new content about what I'm up to next. Thanks for watching. That'll be it for this one. Goodbye.